Okay, so I want to go over the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. So basically, so the central nervous system is made of the brain and the spinal cord, and there's a lot of protective structures in there so that it makes sure it's like not damaged. And some of the structures are continuous, where some can be separated or discrete. So like, the brain will have one set of structures, while the spinal cord will have a different set of structures. So for the protective layer of the spinal cord. So the vertebrae column is the bones of the vertebrae, and they have a rigid protective covering, and the spinal cord is running through the vertebrae foramen, which is that little hole you see in the middle. And basically, this one kind of like brings the nutrients and stuff like that. And the epidural space is filled with adipose tissue. This is the space between the vertebrae and the meninges, and there are a lot of blood vessels that run through there, which are important because it provides a passageway for blood to get into the area. It also has meninges, so pia, arachnoid, and dura mater, and basically we separate them based on the section that they cover. So the dura mater is the most superficial of the meninges. It's very thick, it's strong, it's made of dense irregular connective tissue. It is continuous with the dura of the cranial meninges, so you can follow it up the way from the brain, spinal cord to the brain. It's also continuous with the epidural. The arachnoid is the middle layer. It kind of has like web-like extensions, and in the space called the subarachnoid space. And the connective tissue coverings kind of look like spider webs, and it's very tightly held to the dura mater, and it is continuous with the spine. The arachnoid mater, the brain, so they are continuous with the spinal meninges, and the arachnoid meninx is the continuous with the cranial meninx. The pia mater is the thinnest. It's tied up against the spinal cord itself. It wraps it around and it stops all the little bumps until it's like really tightly around it. It's not continuous with the brain. It's going to be separate. And we have the protective structures. Um, so we have the dendritic ligament, which is right here. And this one helps anchor the arachnoid space matter to the pia matter. And it's filled with cerebrospinal fluid, and its function is to nourish the nervous tissue and also provide shock absorption. So sometimes, like a doctor, when they want to access your cerebrospinal fluid running through your central nervous system, diagnose an infection, um, so they're gonna like see, oh, like they're gonna like tap your back and stuff. And there's a lot of drugs, and those drugs they have to put in the spinal cord because you can't put it orally because they can't make it past the blood-brain barrier. We have the spinal tap, and then it basically is a lumbar puncture in the subarachnoid space. And you tend to do it in the level of the spinal cord because if you do it higher, you might actually puncture into the spinal cord and cause damage. And it doesn't go all the way through the spinal column, and it usually starts at the base of your brain and stops right at the L1 or the first lumbar vertebra. Okay, now we're going to talk about the enlargements. So basically, the spinal cord doesn't run through the whole spinal column. It goes from the medulla oblongata to the first and second lumbar vertebrae. And the spinal cord is not uniform, so there have areas called enlargements. So as you can see there's the cervical enlargement, which is T9 to T12. It's in the thoracic area. The cervical enlargement, which is around the head area. The condys medullaris is at the tip of the spinal cord, right here. This is the tip. There we have the filum terminale, which is that area, the coccyx, an extension of the pia mater too. We have spinal nerves. They're the intervertebral foramen. And nerves are a bundle of neuronal axons. And the spinal nerves exit from the spinal cord, and they have little holes or space between one vertebrae and the next, and you can see them kind of like stack up. We have a few nerves. So we have 8 pairs of cervical nerves, 12 pairs of thoracic nerves, 5 pairs of lumbar nerves, 5 pairs of sacral nerves, and 1 pair of coxal nerves. And then we're gonna have ganglia and roots. So these structures between the spinal cord and the spinal nerve actually start. So roots are little small bundles of neuronal axons between the spinal cord and nerve. And they have the hair-like things they call roots. So dorsal root has dorsal root ganglion, which are a bundle of sensory neuron cells bodies that are kind of bundled in the PNS. There's the anterior ventral root and the dorsal root. The posterior dorsal root ganglion, there's no ganglion. The anterior root cell bodies are actually in the anterior horn of the spinal cord. We have the cauda equina, which is the lower spinal nerves. So the ones that are like below, and it's kind of like the tail of the horse. Okay, so we have this, which is we have the posterior median sulcus, anterior median fissure. And the central canal is a little hole filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And we have gray matter, which are um, gray because there's no myelin sheath covering it. It's all unmyelinated. And the gray commissure is the gray matter that connects the right and left side of the spinal cord. We have horns, and the horns are contain cell bodies from the somatic motor neurons. They have lateral gray horns, which are areas of your spinal cord, and seen in the thoracic and upper segments of the spinal cord, and helps regulate automatic systems of the cardiac smooth muscles and smooth muscle glands in the abdominal thoracic pelvic area. And let's go through the spinal cord anatomy. So if you look at this, there's a lot of different parts to it. So what happens is you have spinal nerves that extend on your body like two-way streets. You have them efferent and afferent. And the off-ramp splits over to the posterior side, where the on-ramp is the anterior side. And the blue, is you can see right here, are the sensory neurons. And this will be bringing information from the body. They tend to be unipolar neurons, and the bodies will be held in the dorsal root ganglion. When the neuron brings the information, the tip of the axons from the sensory neuron is going to be in the posterior gray horn. This is where the sensory neuron is going to transmit a message to another neuron dendrites. We also have interneurons. They're kind of like the telephone operators. They kind of decide which neuron needs to go, and they kind of like make decisions too. They communicate with the dendrites and stuff like that. We have the lateral horn, which contains cell bodies of the automatic motor nerve, and they go out of the anterior gray horn into the anterior roots until they reach the spinal nerve, and they talk to the cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands. And the posterior dorsal root ganglia is the inside the dorsal root where all the sensory nerves are going to be coming in. Let's talk about the generalized reflex arch. So your body responds automatically to pain, danger, and homeostatic imbalances, like if you're cold or super thirsty. So you have different types. Okay, so you have the ones are reflexes that respond to immediate danger. It's called the spinal reflex. It never really goes up to the brain, while the cranial reflexes are what uses your brain stems. They're automatic responses, so you don't really think about it. It's kind of like a starter reflex, like if someone throws a ball at your face. Inborn reflex is something like you're born with, like example, you respond to like extreme pain, temperature, and something like that. It's kind of like what you're born. It's like brain intact. Acquired reflex is something you train over time. Like for example, when you learn how to drive, when someone tries to hit you, you kind of like know how to drive, and you kind of like you're like aware, you can see it and stuff like that. So somatic reflexes is when your skeletal muscles are involved. Automatic or visceral reflexes involve your organs, which like your cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, digestion, heart rate, urination. So an example is someone gets a so a somatic skeletal muscle reflex, it's skeletal muscles, and when the reflex arch gets triggered, it's because a sensory reflex is responding to pain. Okay, so let's say someone is getting a thumbtack in their skin. This is a response to a distal end of a sensory neuron, and the sensory neuron will send the information to the spinal cord that goes to the dorsal side of the spinal cord. That information goes in there, and then, so let me explain it. Pain goes to the sensory neuron, and let me So first it's the pain goes to the sensory neurons. Okay. Let me go back. And then once that happens, it would go to the spinal cord, right? And then it would go to the dorsal side of the spinal cord. And the interneuron is going to be as the integrating center where it kind of just talks as what should we do and stuff like that. And it would talk to the motor neuron. It'd be like, oh, okay, I'm talking to a motor neuron. And it's going to send a message down its axon that goes through the entire root back from the spinal cord and then to the skeletal muscles. And it creates an effector, which is basically means it creates a response. And then you move your foot away from the pain. So, in order to bring a message up to the brain, it's going to use a lot of white matter. Because white matter, what is it? Myelinated axons. And when you see a lot of white matter, there's going to be a lot of myelin there. And there are bundles of myelinated axons that run up and down the spinal cord. We have ascending tracts that carry sensory information to the brain. So after you jab your skin in the push pin, not only do you pull away, but you also send information up to your brain to say that you feel pain. While descending tracts carry the information from the brain to the muscles. So it can be skeletal muscles if you're talking about somatic responses, or they can be bringing in commands your smooth and cardiac muscles. And we have each column brings a set of axon bundles, and they all kind of carry similar information or similar destination. Okay, let's talk about the spinal cord physiology overview. Okay, so sensory information is detected by stimulus by sensory receptors in your body. That information will actually go along the sensory neurons, which are traveling through the sensory nerves. So, nerves, where's number one? So it's detected, right? It goes to the sensory nerves, and these are in the posterior ganglion. It will enter the posterior side of the spinal cord into this posterior gray horn. And then from there, they have two options. The first option, it can go to the sensory or ascending tract, or one of the white columns. So this will allow you to consciously sense the information or your body and feel it. The option two, it can go through a short interneuron, which will send the information over to the anterior horn. And you're gonna feel this like, oh, I feel something in my skin. I'm gonna do something in response. Your brain's gonna send some information down the motor tract or a descending neuron, which will go down the area of the spinal cord before it interacts with a motor neuron. And this will occur when your body's not in danger and you have time to react. But you also have the immediate reflex arch where your body has to reflect immediately. So your interneuron will talk to a motor neuron, and then the information doesn't go to your brain. So your spinal cord would do all interpretation while your brain doesn't know it, you know? And neurons can interact with other automatic motor neurons. Okay, so the spinal cord actually varies along the length of your spinal cord. So you have different sizes. Like in your cervical area, you're gonna have a lot of nerves that are extending around your arm, your neck. And when you look at this, areas that have like a lot of sensory receptors in your like your lower and thoracic and your lumbar area, it kind of helps you control your sensations of your feet. So that's why you see it kind of like a lot of like gray in that area. While with white matter, it's like, there's not as much so you'll have more white matter towards the superior end of your spinal cord and less white matter when you get to inferior because the amount of information going up and down the spinal cord is going to increase as you get closer to the brain. So you see here, you were closer to your brain, right? So you're gonna have a ton of white matter because these are myelinated axons that need to send information through the brain. So here you see more white matter, and as you go down, there's gonna be less. And then the rami of the spinal nerves. So spinal nerves are all named for the vertebral foramen they exit. So the ramus is the first branches off the spinal nerves. It has anterior or ventral ramus, which is thicker, and they control the ventral side. while the posterior dorsal kind of like on the posterior, they control your back muscles, not a lot of neurons running through them. Rami communicantes, they're kind of like little side ones. Look right here. They're kind of little side ones that seem to touch the body of the vertebra. They kind of serve the automatic nervous system, and they help with sensations of your smooth muscle and help control how your digestive system works. And we have meningeal branches that are tiny loops that go back into the vertebral canal, and they serve the meninges into your central nervous system. Let's talk about plexus. So plexus are actually a braid of nerves, and it kind of varies between people. But you have cervical plexus, brachial plexus, lumbosacral, and coxal. The intercostal spinal nerves are not involved in any plexus, and the nerves that involve or merge into each of these plexus. And you can they're important markers when you're looking at people who have spinal cord trauma. Okay, so if you were to sever the spinal cord, everything below it can no longer communicate with the brain. So let's say you have a lumbar or sacral injury, right? You lose control of your legs because now your legs cannot go to your brain. Thoracic, you lose your entire set of legs. So everything down there. If you lose your phrenic nerve, which controls your diaphragm, you lose control over your diaphragm and you stop breathing. We have demitones. Okay. And these stems from the idea that a lot of neurons share one nerve. So each nerve is about 50 to 100 or thousands of nerves. And it's an area of the skin that shares innervation by the same spinal nerve. And the spinal nerve that innervates the part of the shoulder all extends off the spinal nerve C4. So if you trigger one neuron in the nerve, your brain could misconstrue that the stimulus is coming from another neuron in that same nerve. Like if you have a heart attack, right? You feel pain in your left arm, but then since your heart shares as the same dermatome, um, it will kind of like say, oh, you have pain like in that area because if trauma is one location, you might feel it somewhere else. So yeah.